The journey to better started because I needed to go on a journey. By outside measures was super successful, but internally I was not. And I'm hoping that through this I can learn to be a better person and hopefully just to make my portion of the world just a little bit better. I'm Bill Lombardi, your host. Welcome to the journey to better.
All right. Well, everybody, welcome to the Journey to Better. I'm your host, Bill Lombardi. Today, I'm honored to have my friend and colleague and somebody who's helped make my life better, Dr. Bob Foster. And so, Bob, welcome to the Journey to Better. Could you talk to people a little bit about sort of where you're from, how you got to where you are, and then we get a little bit more into some of the things that have become your personal passions that have helped improve the lives of people in the cath lab.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. I tell you, I've been really looking forward to this. So my journey really started. I came from a family that kind of grew up in the hospital. My father was a hospital administrator, and he always joked around that I was joining the enemy. But he was just a great administrator. I keep watching, I keep thinking about it as I went through my career about administrators and what they have to deal with. And, he'd get up early and walk around the hospital, and he'd get to know everybody on every floor before he started his work. And my mother was a physical therapist. And so I kind of was raised in that environment and decided very early on, after working in the yard of the hospital for a couple of years, that was my job. And then finally moved in as transporter and really began to really get a passion for medicine. And one of the cardiologists there kind of took me under his wing and let me, go to his lab and watch some echoes. And part of my job was to do chest compressions on patients as a transporter, and so I got to see a little bit of critical care there, and so decided that's definitely what I want to do, and went to Baylor University and then wanted to get in-state tuition. So I did quite a bit of research at UT Southwestern in Jim Willerson's lab while I was at Baylor, and got some papers written, some imaging papers, and then really dove into cardiac NMR and MRI, and got a job at UAB doing research in isolated perfused rat hearts and cardiology there. So I killed a bunch of rats. And so kind of got into it, got into medical school, knew from then on I really wanted to go into cardiology and thought about surgery. I really loved procedures and, wanted to be a proceduralist, and just didn't really jive as well with the surgeons there as much as I did with some of the medicine people there. And so decided to go into a medicine subspecialty with a high procedural volume, and so got into intervention. Went to UT Southwestern, went back there for residency, came back to UAB for fellowship, and went on staff for a year at UAB, and then decided to go into private practice. Went into private practice and practiced in Birmingham in private practice group. I was third in the group, and when I transitioned over to my current position, there were 14 in the group, so we grew it into a really strong group. Leaned more on peripherals. I was more of the peripheral guy for the practice, and so in '99 started doing peripheral work and kind of evolved into peripheral intervention, and that's kind of that was my journey until things began to kind of fall apart and had to change positions.
So when did you graduate interventional fellowships? You started in 98, 99?
Yeah. So let's see, it was 96, 97 is when I finished my fellowship.
Okay.
Went on staff really in 96. I had a lot of experience in cardiac MR, and the guy who was the director of cardiac MR left. I still had one more year of fellowship, but I had the most experience in cardiac MR. So they actually, and we had back then it was 2 years of clinical and 2 years of research. And so I was in my second research year, and they just brought me on staff as director of clinical cardiac MR. Of course, this is before the time you had to do interventional fellowships, and so uh, I joined a practice where I was able to do 500 or 600 interventions, and then the first boards came out in 2000, interventional boards, and sat for those. So that was my track. I never really did an formal interventional fellowship.
So you're doing 500-600 procedures a year right from the get-go, right?
Yeah, yeah, we were high volume, and a
Yeah.
lot of them were peripherals as time went on. We started out with some of the simple stuff back in the '90s with renals, and then some of the iliacs, and then kind of morphed into a lot of the more complex peripheral work.
Those are longer procedures in general, a lot of the coronary work, right? I mean, you just spend more time at the table, more time standing.
Yeah,
Look at some
long
of
CTOs. I mean, CTOs obviously better than anybody, but that's what we were doing. It was all this long SFA CTOs trying to work our way through, and I think the way that you were successful is having patience, but you spend a lot of time and a lot of fluoro time, and a lot of time standing at the table to be successful back then.
and then you started having back problems. When did your back start giving you issues and when did you start getting worried?
Yeah, so my back started bothering me, and I really tried to stay healthy. I mean, I was running, I was doing, these boxing workouts. I was doing everything I could to really stay healthy, snow skiing with my kids and doing triathlons, and really thought that that would kind of keep me in good enough shape because I knew that, just wearing the lead apron was going to be an issue long term. And when I was 40, in my early mid 40s, like 45, I ruptured my first disc, and didn't have any paralysis or anything, but just good bit back pain. Took a couple months off out of the lab, and then about 3 months later, started back in the lab. Got some lighter lead to see if I could tolerate that, and knew I'd pay the price a little bit from the radiation exposure standpoint, but at least it would spare my back a little bit and get me back in the lab. So I really built myself back up to going full speed, and then about 5 years later, when I was 51, this was back in 2014, and my disc ruptured again, and it was leg paralysis, and just an awful situation. I knew trajectory of my life was going to change at that point.
Yeah, I mean, so you're 51, you're partially paralyzed from a disc rupture. Did you end up having to have surgery to decompress that? What happened to your leg?
Yeah, so
What was
I went they did. They were able to. There was a piece that came out. It wasn't attached to my disc anymore. So a lot of times, when these things rupture, they'll retract back in almost like a tongue. But this one, was a full blown rupture, and so the piece came out and was sitting on the nerve. And they said, to relieve the pain and hopefully get the nerve to recover, we got to get that off the nerve. So they did a microlaminectomy. um, it's amazing what they can do from a spine standpoint now. I had the surgery at noon and I was home by 5. So it's a quick surgery, but my leg still didn't work. I couldn't walk. Um, and the pain was relieved, so that helped. But I'm a very, very positive person, and almost to my detriment. But uh, I went through a really hard period there after a couple of weeks where my leg wasn't getting better. Of what am I going to do now? What am I going to be able to do with my grandkids? What is my job going to look like? I'm going to be a clinic doctor, and just do clinic work. And I went through a really, really dark time, and struggled with depression. It was hard on me, hard on our marriage. It was a really, really tough time.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, right? I mean, there are a couple famous people I know right now that are out of the lab for different reasons because of their injuries. Maybe to sort of, when you think back to that period, right? It got really dark, it got really bad. What helped you get out of that phase? I mean, it goes back to a little bit, right? Your job has become so important.
Mhm.
Was how did you balance sort of the hopefulness, but the reality check of what you had to do for the rehab and where you were going to go?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of prayer. I can tell you that, and I think I always really think that God puts us in situations um, where we, where we have opportunity, and through those opportunities, whether it's to help others or whether it's to protect you, I think that you have to look at some of those situations as being, what am I being told? What's my real journey here? And could I have taken that journey without this disruption? And so, I began, as I had a lot of time on my hands, obviously, to look for ways that maybe I could get back in the lab. The neurosurgeon said, you just can't put the lead apron back on your back. That's just not, this is going to keep happening. You're going to have fusions. It's going to be a long, hard road for you if you get back in. And so really, I just began looking at solutions that allowed you to get the weight off your back. And so, I tried, for me, I did try, zero gravity because it did, help get the weight off my back, but I still had the drag of the boom, and it was, not, it was making things a little bit worse for me. So that's when I really started saying there's got to be a solution out there. And if there's not, what are the opportunities to develop it? And there was a gastroenterologist at our um, in my hospital who had a startup. He had a med tech startup. It was on computers, and I don't know exactly what it was, but I said, what are next steps if you have an idea? And me and a friend of mine just kind of wrote this out. He's got some engineering background and entrepreneurial background, and he said, well, there may be an opportunity here that we can look for a way to develop something for you. And that's really what it came out of is, how could we get you back in the lab? And to me, it was worth an investment of, even if it just got me back in the lab, then, I'm only 51. I still had, 15 more years of practice. And I'd really love to, that was my passion, and wanted to get back in there. And so that's when the kind of journey started to develop a new device.
So talk to me about, so you're doing rehab at this point because your leg still doesn't work right. So how long was the rehab process to where I assume your leg got back to normal or you got back to where you could do what you do? How long was that and what was that like?
Yeah, so I was 3 months completely out of work. I mean, I couldn't even go into work, couldn't drive. It was unfortunate my right leg, and so I couldn't press the gas pedal. So it was 3 months where I could at least get to the point where I could stand with my leg locked, and at least stand up. If I bent it at all, my quad wouldn't work at all. So I'd go to the floor. So I used crutches and canes and sticks and things like that to support me when I walked. And then after 3 months, I went back in and started doing some clinic work. And then it was a year before I really thought, well, I think that I could probably go back in and maybe limit myself to one or two cases a day at the most, just see how it feels. So I was pretty much out of the lab though for a year. And then it took, probably another couple years really before I got back completely up to speed. But by then, we had a solution that I could not wear the lead apron. And so that's the path that we took. But I was completely out of the lab for a year and out of work for 3 months.
Why was it so important to get back in the lab?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that you put forth all this, not only this effort, but you feel like, to me, it was a gifting, and that was my gift, that was my passion, and that's really where I felt comfortable. I love taking care of patients, I really did,
Mhm.
and felt like that, my hands and my work is really what I enjoyed the most. If I looked at what I enjoyed the most in my day, it was when I was in the lab. I mean, that's the part of my job, and everybody has parts of their job that they really enjoy, and the part of my job that I enjoyed the most was actively taking care of patients, interacting with staff, and that was my family, and we spent so much time together, and I missed that. I missed being with that cath lab family, and as a team taking care of critically ill patients, and when I was taken out of that, I didn't have any exposure to that team. The care was not, critical, and it was clinical. And so, not that you didn't feel like you were doing good, but you felt like you had all this experience that you continue to want to share and continue to want to teach. And we had teaching fellows and things like that. And that's really what I enjoy doing.
All right. So we've got to get back in the lab. It's important to do it. I'm walking again, human again. I want to go forward on my path. How do I build? For 40 years, people have been wearing lead. That's the only solution to manage radiation allowed. How did you look at the problem and how did you come up with the solution?
Yeah. Well, it needed somebody a whole lot smarter than me. I mean, I had, really the idea, but to actually make it so that it's something that is that'll really work. The challenge was, and this is what I kind of challenged these designing engineers. They'd never been in a lab, so first thing we did is went to the lab, took them to the lab, and said, "This is the issue. This is where I stand. This is where the radiation's coming from, and I need a barrier between me and that radiation. It's not rocket science. I just need a barrier of something to block between me and that radiation, where it's not on my body, where it's supported by the floor, the ceiling, wherever." And and so, they got it and had a couple design changes, and we kind of did it on paper mostly, and then finally got it to, while we were doing that, kind of searching. Obviously, is there a reason why this hasn't been done before? I mean, why hadn't it been done before? Why wasn't that the original? And then, we never had lead aprons. Why didn't somebody build a barrier protection? And so I think there was this question of, yeah, I'm sure somebody's thought of it before, and nobody really had. So so the challenge was that you had to be able to have multiple access sites. Ideally, if you could protect the team, if it even if it just worked for cardiology, and like I say, get me back in the lab. The whole idea was not to build a business. It really wasn't. It was there's got to be a way, even if it's just, special opt out for me. Um, but then as we started going down this road, we realized that we could protect the entire team, and we could better protect the operator head to toe beyond lead apron. And then you kind of get into prototypes and testing prototypes, and do they work, and then getting into the kind of the real world. What procedures does it work on? What procedures does it struggle with? And can you make any modifications? So then you create more modifications, and you try to engineer out anything that would be hazardous, that for the product itself, or hazardous for the equipment, so that it doesn't bump into things, and so that it doesn't interfere with the cameras, and so that it doesn't tip over, and so all those things really have to be engineered out by like I say, by pretty smart people.
When's the first time you did a case without lead?
Yeah, so 2018, late 2000, I guess early 2019, we did the first patient, and then the first commercial unit was sold in 2019, and the first Rampart was in our lab at St. Vincent's East here in Birmingham, and that's the same unit I used for the next 2.5 years before I came over to Rampart full time.
What what was the emotion like doing your first case back?
Oh, Well, it's kind of funny because the guy who helped me develop Tom Livingston, the guy who helped me develop it, and he was there. We were, we had kind of just formed the company, and the first thing I did is went and put my lead on. And he came, I came walking out with my lead on, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I thought we were beyond this." And I said, "Yeah, it's just, you're right." And I took it off, and so it was kind of one of those things. You've done it for so many years, and it was amazing. You felt like, I think you coined the term naked PCI. You do feel weird, not having that on. And then, after you've used it for months and months and months, you feel like if you have to go in a case where you do put on your lead, you feel like, good gracious, my head is getting all this radiation. I got this big hole in the sleeve, and then I almost felt vulnerable, more vulnerable, obviously, with the lead apron on. And so you kind of transition when you're just so used to never putting on your lead. Number one, it feels heavier. And number two, you feel more vulnerable with the lead apron. So, but I tell you, it was a great feeling. And at the end of the day, you're like, wow, that was special that got to the end of the day and don't have that kind of tiredness and fatigue that I used to have at the end of the day wearing lead all day.
How hard was it to get staff adoption? Because again, it's like this is, weird magic, crazy, you're doing things nobody's done ever, right?
Mhm.
You're not supposed to be at a table with radiation without lead.
Yeah.
How hard was it first to get staff to sort of buy in and be like, hey, maybe you don't need to wear them?
Yeah. I tell you, I mean, there is a learning curve there because, it does have to be draped, which doesn't take long, but it's, one step that they didn't have to do before. The operator's kind of in charge of everybody in the room, and so you have to be sure there's, no gaps. But I tell you that really about the only way that you could do that, they're not going to take your word for it, that this thing is protecting them well enough. You really have to have real-time monitors. And so we put real-time monitor to show them what their numbers are. And it was amazing. They first of all didn't have a clue what the numbers meant. They don't, they don't know about their badges. They don't know what their badges really mean. Um, they typically don't look at it, don't look at it anymore, those who, do wear their badges. But once you got that, and once you used it every time, then the staff was begging to be in the Rampart room. We didn't have Rampart favorite room, so it was like, I want to be in the Rampart room because I don't wear my lead today. And anybody who was like having a back issue, any of the staff that was having back issues, they put them in the Rampart room. And again, I think that my biggest passion is how do we get those before you're injured
Right.
to really care, that, your biggest risk is going to be orthopedic. It's probably not cancer because the cameras are getting better. The amount of radiation we're getting is, is
Lower.
tolerable to, it's low. They've gotten a lot better. But and so our risk of cancer is not, not that high, but your risk of a back injury is, 60% and of disabling back injuries. And I didn't know that getting into this field. I in knowing that, would I have changed my, my pathway and done another occupation that you didn't have to wear the lead? I don't know. But, it's the problem is it's changed my life now. Now we've got 7 grandkids and there's a lot I can't do with them. I can't put them in car seats and I'd love to go snow skiing with them when they got a little bit older. And not going to be able to do that. Can't run anymore. There's a lot of things that I really wish that I knew that, even though, you know, you think you can physically stay strong enough, I think just that day in and day out wearing that lead apron, your spine just can't take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I look at it as the people you were at most are the fellows and the people early in their career. A lot of us, the damage has already been done.
Right. So,
So, talk to me a little bit about how your colleagues view it, because I'm always interested how change occurs in our profession.
mhm.
So, was everybody like, "Oh, this is great! I'm dropping my lead. I want Rampart. I'm in," or was it a lot of like, "That's crazy stuff. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm wearing my lead. I want my back surgery.
Yep. Well, I tell you, it's like with any startup, any device, any piece of equipment, there's going to be the early adopters and there's going to be the never adopters, and I think you have to kind of take that you have to take that into stride. I do think that you've got to prove, you've got to show data, you got to say, hey, listen, this is safe for you, and it's not just a data set I'm showing you was safe in a study, but we're going to put these badges on. We're going to show you it's safe for you, and so adoption wise, from a physician standpoint, is very, very good. And I would say high that there's obviously will always be some skeptics. There will always be people who want these crazy long-term data or whatever. But then it's too late. What you really need to know is this better than your lead apron? If this is better than your lead apron, then for you, you ought to adopt it. But I do think that we kind of look at it as kind of three prong. I think you've got to get physician buy-in, which really is not that hard. Everybody knows they're tired of wearing lead aprons. Everybody knows the fatigue factor. Everybody knows you're not as sharp at the end of the day, and you're ready to go home. Everybody knows you go home and you lay down because your back is killing you. That's the reality. And and could you get better radiation protection? I think absolutely. I think we want to get as low as possible, and I think that ought to be as close to zero for our careers. But the second prong is radiation safety officers. There are some that are, that they don't really follow it too closely, or other that are um, maybe a little bit worried that if they say, "Yeah, this is better than lead apron," then they've got to, make recommendations that every lab is changed, and who doesn't get one, and has to stay in the lead aprons, and then you get that battle. So it's a disruptor, and when you have that disruption, you're going to have some of those battles, and then probably the biggest one is administration and the financial part of it, because it's a capital expense that if you look at the return on investment, it's maintaining your staff, and so there actually is some financial benefit if you maintain your high volume operators, and that's who's usually going to go out, is the ones that have been in the lab so long, and they're the most talented operators and the most talented teams, and those are the ones that you're going to leave and have to turn over. Um, but more importantly, they ought to be worth it. There ought to be a standard, and I don't know the pathway to changing that standard, but I think there ought to be a change in standard, that now there are new solutions available, that shouldn't we provide the best solutions that are available at this day and age? I mean, I don't know of anything in medicine that hasn't changed in 100 years. And like you say, the lead apron's been around 100 years, and it hadn't changed, and we have not changed our own protection for 100 years. You know,
We've changed how we train people. We've changed a lot of stuff. Medicine is the least adaptive, innovative field in many ways. So the administration piece to me is a key here. And I want to, in your discussions when you started and as you got into this phase, right? How many administrators actually want to protect their staff?
mm,
Like, because this is part about caring about people, right?
it
Like,
is.
getting people out of lead, protecting people, preventing orthopedic injury. How many administrators actually care,
Mm,
right? Will put money to protect staff. And I mean, could you imagine going to your dad saying, "Dad, you're running the hospital. We gotta do this." Is your dad gonna be like, "Nah, sorry, man, we're only sitting on 10 billion in cash.
right.
We can't really afford to protect our staff. That really isn't a priority to us."
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
do
and
you
to me, I think that that some of it has been that they could say, well, they are being protected. They have the lead, we got them the lead aprons. And so it's getting them to the next level. It's kind of like the seatbelt versus airbag. You can save lives if you go to the next level. And I think that's ultimately, and to me, I think it's not just lives, it's really wellness. We've got to keep people healthy. And I think it's preventing a lot of females from coming into our subspecialty. I think we're losing a lot of great talent there because, I don't blame them. I think they're worried about it. And I think if we can, if we can create an environment that's the safest possible, then I think that's the direction we ought to go. Your question is how many administrators care? That's a hard question. I think they do. I think to some degree they probably do care. I think that they don't understand, and even the people who are working in the cath labs don't understand radiation, don't understand the protection, don't understand what the numbers mean, don't understand what the risks are. And I think we're finally bringing that to light. And we're doing it through, the new technologies at the meetings, but we're also doing it through ORSIP, which we're, really trying to create an organization that will raise awareness to the problem that's out there that I think we as cardiologists, I can tell you from my standpoint, I can tell you, Bill, I wouldn't be here if my back hadn't ruptured. I would be in that lab and I would be going full speed and I wouldn't even look up because it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes pushing, and it'd be much better if we had it from the top down, saying, hey, we want the best protection for our operators. Our human resource is the most valuable thing in this hospital, and we want you to stay around for your entire career and be healthy on the backside. And and I think if we can get to that point, then I think it'll be a whole lot easier because right now it's driven from the bottom up. It's physician driving. Hey, I want this. I need this. I'm not going to practice without this. And I think if we can do it from the top down, to me, I think it shows more compassion. But there's a cost there that again they run into.
Right. Yeah, there's a cost to a lot of things in life. The question is the cost of whom and what's the cost?
Mhm.
This is, Peter Attia is an expert, is a physician who's in the longevity and what really terms is what's called health span. And I think what most interventional cardiologists miss is health span. There's a difference between living until you're 70 and a difference between picking up your kids or your grandkids when you're 61.
Yeah.
Right? That's the difference between I lived to 70 versus I had a health span, which is I lived a quality of life. And how much do you think our profession and those who support us ignore it's the dirty little secret, right? You go to the meeting, half the interventionists have had back surgery, have cervical issues,
Yep.
rehab program. My close friends, like Mike Wyman's, have a 20-minute back exercise every day because his sort of back he can't run on pavement anymore.
Yep.
He can barely run at all because it's a long term. He has zero gravity for a chunk of his career, but all that early stuff got him. Aaron's had a microdiscectomy. We just know a famous person, right? I don't know if that's public, but somebody
Yeah.
very well known just was a quadriplegic for a couple of days, and they're on gear rehab. I know Dave Reisig has been doing a lot of stuff with the documentary about this sort of dirty little secret of our profession. Do you think that finally, because we're getting some well-known people doing this a long time, who are now suffering the consequences of that there'll be a logarithmic ramp up for people like this is a problem, right?
Yeah.
There are solutions out there, but this is a problem that we need to confront as a profession.
Yeah, I think we absolutely do. Just like you're confronting, to me, this journey that really has not been a very pleasant journey. Could certainly be a whole lot better, and protecting ourselves from a lot of the pressures that we put on, that are put on us, and that we put on ourselves. And I think this is just one more step. The thing about a lot of that is you can get some healing from that. You can get some change there, but the physical damage you can't reverse. You can't go back. I can't go backwards. I can't get the spine that I want now. You know, and and so I think it's one of these irreversible damages, and the radiation that you've gotten and how much DNA's already been changed in you. A lot of that you can get micro repair, but there's also long-term effects. And we know the longer you're in the lab, the more likely you are to get cancer changes. So I think that's the kind of thing that can't be reversed. And I wish that certainly from a radiation standpoint, we talk about the radiation, but people don't understand it. The units are all over the place. And I've been doing this, with Rampart now almost 10 years. And the amount of knowledge that and my understanding now of radiation, and you go and you're teaching people about radiation and where it comes from and how it damages, your body and your DNA and your risks. And people just don't they don't understand it. So I think we're finally moving the needle, especially in some of these society meetings. They're now making it their platform. I think Sky and with Rising, Hermiller, and I think they're making it their platform because they've experienced that there's got to be a change. And I think those well-known people now, not only are they looking at some mentors that they've lost, but they're looking now at the damage that's been done to them, and they're looking at this next generation. And to me, that's what leaders do.
Right.
Leaders don't look at themselves. They look at, how can I lead this next generation and leave this occupation better than I found it? And if
Yeah.
we can do that, then I think we've done something.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think it's really important for people, especially the young people going out to get jobs. Ask for this in your contracts. And I don't, because I'm conflicted. I don't care which system you get, but
Yeah.
if you're wearing lead, you're it's a problem.
Mhm.
If you know it's a problem, it's a dirty little secret we need to confront. Um, I want to ask a question because this came up on a couple of podcasts tonight, and knowing you and some of our interactions, talk to me about how your faith
Mm.
has affected both your career in medicine and your career with Rampart. How do you how does that help you, and how do you find balance in it?
Yeah, and I can say that all of us, obviously, all of us are sinners, and all of us fail. So I would say that I look back and I think, could I have done it better? And I do think that faith journey to me has given me a peace and a calmness that it doesn't put the pressure on me, that I turn that over to my God and look at the things that He's given me and the opportunity He's given me as a gifting, and that I need to be um, honest and respectful of that gift. And as I've kind of walked my walk, um, I think that it was very powerful with my church, and I can tell you an experience that I had. Luckily, when I was in my residency, Dan Foster was head of medicine at UT Southwestern, and he would talk to us about when we get sued. Not if you get sued, but when you get sued, and all the good things that you're doing, and that you're not perfect, and that when you get sued, you need to be honest and go through the process and then move on. And because you're don't let that get you down, because that can be devastating to a lot of people. And so I got sued 20 years ago, and the night before I was supposed to go to court, um, a good friend of mine, we met up at the church, and he said, "Let's just pray that it goes away." The night before, it'd been going on for 5 years, and you're like, "There's, what are the chances?" So we prayed that it would just go away, And the next morning, went to court, sat in the courtroom, and then my lawyer came out and said they dismissed the case. So, I've seen some amazing miracles through prayer in my career. And to me, I think that that motivates me and takes the pressure off me. That the more work that I do and the more expectations that I have, I'm putting that on myself. And there's so many things I don't have control of, just like my back. I looked at that initially as just a devastating problem. But, for me, selfishly, for me, it was a devastating problem. But look at how many people it might help now. And was that worth me going through that in order to for God to use that opportunity in me to prepare me for at that time in my life and where I could where I could even transition now to full time, which I'm not sure that I'd be able to do if I had young kids running around. All my kids are grown, we have grandkids, and so it gave me an opportunity where now I can focus on this full time. And I probably wouldn't have happened when I was with my first disruption when I was 40. I'm 45, but at 51 and now 61, I can focus on it full time. And again, I think that's what that's where my really passion comes from now, is just giving it all to him, or whatever he does with it, he does with it.
Yeah. I mean, how much, it's funny, I was talking to Bob Federici about this, and it's, your story reminds me of manifesting, right?
Mhm.
We talk a lot about whether it's faith or not, but like the power of a positive attitude, or the ability to let go and just control what you control, but also that I'm gonna get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much does that come out through your faith to be able to manifest or stay positive? Like when you were out of work and you couldn't walk and it got dark and it got ugly, and somebody was carrying you for a while, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that it was hard. Like I say, it was a pretty dark time, and I don't think that to me, I think you're going to go through these emotional changes, irrespective of how strong, because we are, we aren't perfect creatures, and so we're going to have those highs, we're going to have those lows, but if you know where to go during those times, to me, for me, it's prayer, and that I'm not alone in this. I'm never alone in this. And I think to me, that's what gets me through some of those times, is that, I have a cheerleader, and I have somebody who wants me, who loves me, regardless of where I am. And that's what to me gets me out, gets you out of those holes. But also when you're at the very highs, again, at times I forget who I should give the credit to, and it's those really highs that you think, wow, just as much as the lows I lean, I need to lean in the highs too, and give glory. And so that's really helped me. We are, our company is, kind of faith based as well, and so, we know that that's kind of what drives us. And so even the name of the product is has a Bible verse associated with it. So, the the Rampart M1128 is from Matthew 11:28. It's just take off that heavy burden off your back and give you rest. And so it's just opportunity to talk about our faith and talk about what drives us. And so it's a neat that you can, even through this, that you can share what does help you out during those low times.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm going to change topics a little bit. But so you and I sort of, we have a little bit backwards. My dad was a pilot.
Hmm.
Your son is a pilot. If people don't know, Bob's son actually is one of the rarefied few. He's an F-22 Raptor pilot in the Air Force. We thank him for his service.
Thank you.
But he also has a very physically demanding job that will potentially pay a price on him. It's a high risk job. I mean, they do a lot of training. I mean, these are, flying airplanes at the edge of their envelopes. A lot of these planes now can fly beyond the physical capabilities of the pilots.
Mhm.
Do you guys talk a little bit about that at all? I mean, is there some crosstalk between sort of
Yeah.
what you're doing?
We actually do because I know, that he's tall and he's pretty tall and thin, and he even says, luckily, I do
Good
think
for you gotta be short to be a fighter.
I know he's tall and thin, but he is he does say that they are because he's in the F-22 and they pull 9 or 10 Gs, and he said a lot of the problem is they're doing a lot of training with air to air combat,
Right.
so that's our best air to air combat plane, and so when they're doing these
It's
dog fights,
it's even.
yeah, when they're doing these dogfights, he's turned around backwards. He's looking for the other planes, and so it's very awkward position to take these G's. And he's complained a good bit about his back. Now, luckily, our Air Force is very good about after those flights, they have access to chiropractors and physical therapists and things that they can use as much as they want. And so, physical trainers, so they have people that try to get them, keep them in as good a shape as they possibly can. But obviously, it's a risk. My other son is 6'3". He's an ophthalmologist, and he's already having they get cervical issues looking down at microscopes all the time. And again, I think that a lot of occupations. And of course, there's no help for him. There's no physical therapist or a chiropractor that's helping him unless he pays out of pocket. So again, I think medicine is one of those things that we've even heard some stories about responses of some administrators, and I don't think it's very typical, but they're just saying, no, we're not going to do that. You knew what you were getting into, and you think, golly, I mean, that's cold, that you're not getting me the best protection and valuing me and my work enough to take care of us. But again, like you and I we're so patient focused for so many years, we ignore ourselves, and I think that's time to stop. I think we can create a much better environment for us to work in, healthier environment. I think patient care will get better too because you keep the best people in the lab, the best teams in the lab, and and I think less fatigue at the end of the day if you're not wearing the lead for 8 hours.
Yeah, well, we all know that. I mean, just like the fighter pilots, the mistakes happen at the ends because you're tired and mentally worn out. If you can do things to keep yourself less mentally worn out, you can do your job better, right? We all know competition rates go up the later in the day you go.
Yeah.
The longer a case goes, the more likely something bad's to happen. And so I think, these are things. Tell me something about you that I don't know that would surprise
Oh gosh. Let's see. Um, Well, this probably won't surprise you, but this is something that I have to deal with. Is that this afternoon I'm going for an MRI because I'm going to probably have a meniscal tear in my knee. So one more wear and tear of this body that is just from wearing the weight. But let's see. I grew up on a farm in South Texas, and really, I mean, I am a Texas Georgia redneck. I mean, that is what I am, and just like to be in nature, like to hunt. I'm a bird watcher, not one of those that will go on bird trails and stuff, but just love the peace of watching birds, having early morning devotion and quiet time, and getting your day started right. And to me, I think that's where if I start and end the day that way, to me, it gives you that kind of wind up and that wind down, and puts the day into perspective. Where if you can go out and say, I really want to make a difference and be used to change someone else's life today, and looking for those opportunities. That's really what drives me.
Tell me, you're either on a fishing trip or a hunting trip. You walked out, you see something that makes you closer to God, closer to nature,
Yep.
that's impacted you? Where was that? What was going on when you did that?
Mm. Yeah, I think interestingly, you think as you go out and you deer hunt. I guess there's two things. One is you go out and deer hunt, and you are able. And I really, I mean, I've probably only killed 5 or 6 deer in my life because I just like watching them. And people say, "Why didn't you shoot them or whatever?" And I'm like, well, yeah, I like deer meat to eat, but also I enjoy much more just watching them, and more importantly, is watching everything. Or just watching. You feel like you're watching nature at its rawest, and now that my son's moving to Alaska, looking forward to just being out there where you really see kind of untouched, if the mosquitoes don't carry you off, some untouched nature. That, I mean, eagles flying around, and to me, just God's creation and how he provides for all of that. And your brain, as you're up there, you're watching squirrels and you're watching woodpeckers and you're watching all these different things that they don't know you're watching them. And to me, that's where my resting heart rate's probably 50, but at those times it just goes down, I think, into the 30s. Just kind of everything just kind of slows down, and you get to just observe. There's just some amazing nature.
That's awesome. Well, we're getting kind of to the end, so I always try to turn the microphone around. So, in the last 10 minutes, do you have any questions for me?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think this Journey to Better is a fantastic thing that you're doing, and just all aspects of medicine, and encouraging the younger people again to do it. What do you see as if you see interventional cardiology 10 years from now? What do you see happening? Where do you think it's going to be from from people just starting medical school and saying, "I think I'm going to do cardiology"? What does
Yeah.
that look like 10 years from now?
What do I think or what do I hope? Because they're probably different animals.
Yeah. Well, give me both.
I think that if the people going into the specialty don't start to remember, um, I think it's becoming very corporate. I think it's very competitive. I think it's very not patient centric. And in the grand scheme of things, AI and a lot of the stuff can do your job better than you. So it's really how do you bring value, right? And there's like the next 2 books I have to read about valuation. So I don't know this, but you know, value comes in a lot of different things, right? It's what people will pay. It doesn't what you think you're worth. Value is
Mm,
what people will do. The second is value is what can you give, right? How do you support? And so I'm worried that we are losing compassion. And I don't think just for patients, I think it's for each other.
mhm,
And I think that's an administrative want. They want physicians to clash because then they can use them to suppress them. Because if they're collaborative and they're together, we can hopefully get administration to have compassion. Because what's happened now, in my opinion, is compassion has been lost by the healthcare industry. Like, how can you sit there and say, I don't really care about your back and you wouldn't sign up?
mhm.
It's like I was joking with somebody. I'd like to go to the CEO of my hospital, walk in their office, take them out to the lobby, hand them some $400 laptop and say, sorry, your office is broken. Your computer doesn't work. Here's your new office. Here's where you have to work. That's what you do to me every day. My
Yeah.
labs are breaking. I don't have the stuff like, you know, how do we get it to resonate? Oh, and by the way, can you wear the 20 pounds of lead while you're out? Um, what I hope is that we can change medical training and that we can change the attitude to one of not how do I avoid, how do I point fingers, how do I suppress, but how do I look at those who can do and how do I become them? Right?
Mhm.
Doing the most volume does not actually mean you're the best. That's actually a lie of medicine. That means you make the most money. It
Yeah.
means you're the biggest ego because you do the most volume. That doesn't make you best.
Yeah.
That's the problem in medicine. The scorecard fundamentally is not based right. What I would like to see is people stop focused on money, competition, and best, right? Their pride, their ego, their things. Work on better.
Mhm.
When you can see somebody do something you can't, you should figure out why can they? Not that you're incapable, not that you can't. I mean, I heard this, somebody was at a meeting and they're like, well, basilica will never be widely adopted. Like, that's such a lame comment of somebody at a podium, because
Yeah.
all it means is that person does not have the grit or the
Mhm.
courage to learn to do it. Therefore, because they don't have the grit, determination, the willingness to learn it, nobody else should. And that repeated comment from the top down prevents people from change,
Mhm.
right? I mean, this is simple. There should be a guideline statement that says within the next 5 years, their physicians should not be wearing lead in a catheter. It
Mhm.
is a catastrophic orthopedic nightmare of our profession. This has got to end. Image guided PCI. If you're not IVUSing or doing OCT to put a stent, you shouldn't be allowed in the catheter.
Yeah.
14% of people do. The other 86% of you got to go get yourself checked in.
Mhm.
And I think, this is coming out now with peripheral, right? Peripheral will mention, shockingly, when you image from the inside, you get better long-term outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nobody's going to do it, aren't you? So I guess for me, what I hope is I want people to change the mindset of I can't, therefore it shouldn't,
Mhm.
and I don't want to put myself at risk. I mean, it was fun. I was talking to my partner. He was down in Australia, and the question was, are there patients we should say no to?
Mhm.
And it bothered him because he didn't answer it as well as he'd like, and I'm not sure I ever answer it other than, yeah, we should say no, but it shouldn't be because I can't.
Right.
It should be because the reason to do it
Yeah.
is
Right.
bad. But
Mhm.
a prevention has nothing to do with should, it's can.
Yeah.
The doctor you show up to is going to determine whether you get an amputation or not, right? If you have a high risk PCI, your doctor determines whether you're going to get it or not, which determines your long term outcome because it's about can you.
Yeah. And because
So,
I can't do it, you don't get it. You know?
right, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it
Right.
because it's about me and my volume. And I just think for everybody out there, every time you're at a meeting and you hear can't, that becomes shouldn't.
Mhm.
When you're in a cath up with an attending, they're like, oh, I don't need to do an IVUS. I've got IVUS eyes. No, you don't. You're full of shit. You're
Yeah.
lying.
Yeah.
Don't be that person. Be open, be compassionate, be curious. Do something 10 or 20 times before you decide you should do it. And you know what happens for the most part? If you do a procedure 20 times, you never worry about the randomized trial of it because you know how to do it. So you know it works. So you're
Yeah.
not going to.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, long term, is my hope is that we'll build a culture that embraces failure, embraces compassion, embraces innovation, and does not continue the 100-year repeated mistakes of we do not adopt innovation because we make up a bunch of excuses. What you're doing with radiation safety is the same problem. This should be widely adopted in 3 years.
Mhm.
This shouldn't take 15. This is insane.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're making it a money issue goes back to completely what's wrong with healthcare. People do not have compassion for people.
Yeah.
Right? You work in a nonprofit hospital. Why do they need $1 billion in cash reserves?
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
And the interest that they're making on that could pay for things that, because theoretically your tax exempt status is because that money is supposed to go back into capital improvements to improve patient care. So that would be my hope, is that in 10 years, we have broken the culture of 100 years of can't, shouldn't, beat up on, bullying, and just help each other improve. That's my hope for this journey.
Love it. Well, very good.
Thank you so much for being on. Any final comments before we move forward or we check out of it?
No, I would just I just say that, I think that I get so excited about medicine still, and I think that, there's, in my mind, there are few jobs in the world that are as rewarding as what we had the opportunity to do and still do, and can kind of look back, and to me, um, I think it's the future is continuing to look bright, but I think it's because I think there's a lot of changes that have to be made. And every job, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, whatever, there's struggling times, there's difficult things, there's ways that we can make it better. Like I say, the problem is that we've got to figure out what those things are, put some effort into making them better, and not just talk about them. Because just like radiation safety, we've been talking about it. There was a Sky survey in 2004, and then another one in 2014 showed the same thing. We just got another one in 2024, and I'm sure it's going to show the same thing, that we're not working in a safe environment. And yet, we keep getting data, and not acting on it for ourselves. And I think a lot of it's because we feel like, we're being selfish because this is about us. It's not about the patient, because we're so patient driven. But it is about the patient, because, we've got to keep ourselves in good shape so that we can take care of them. And all these products that are out there and all this new technology, it needs operators to do it, and do it well. And if they're not out there, the technology goes nowhere, and the patients don't benefit. So again, I don't think we should be selfish about demanding the best and safest environment to work in.
Well, I'm going to tell you honestly, you are the patient. When you get your back surgery because the hospital didn't bother to protect you,
Yeah.
you just became the patient, not because of your choice. It was because of the choices of others.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we've got to work on not letting people bully us into harm.
Yep.
So I hope that helps people. Bob, thanks for coming on. It's been great.
Thank you.
Say hi to your son. Tell him thank you for his service.
Absolutely.
And if you want to stop by on the way to Alaska to take a break,
We'll definitely do it.
Love that.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the journey to better. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.